There are several recordings in the New Testament scriptures that have to do with Jesus using the number 7 as the picture of completeness or fullness, perhaps even perfection. Good morning, I'm Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Tuesday. In Matthew chapter 6, in the Sermon on the Mount, we read that Jesus taught his disciples how to pray, and he actually used 7 different petitions to represent the things that we need to pray about on a regular basis. He began in Matthew 6 and verse 9 by saying, "Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name." We see that term of endearment whenever he calls him our Father. But we also see his request is that his name should be hallowed and God should be treated as holy and held in highest reverence. We should always strive to never use his name casually, but to revere him as the God that he is. The second request here says, "Thy kingdom come," which, by the way, is a realization that God is setting up a moral and a spiritual kingdom here within this fallen world of evil all around us. We are actually asking God, may you dwell in me to set up that spiritual kingdom that will continue to grow, not only in the hearts of believers, but even expand to others who would come to believe in your Son also. The third request, "Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Now, if God's will is to be done down here, it has to be fulfilled in the heart and the life of every believer, first of all. This may even sound like a lofty plan here, since we know that God's will is done in heaven to the very T, as his angel messengers and those who serve him carry out every wish and every command. But we must pray that his will would be done here through his sovereignty and by my submission to his leading, by his working in my life and even working through my life. I want God's will to be done here on earth. The fourth request is simply, give us this day our daily bread. Now, we recall that God provided the daily bread in the wilderness for the Israelites through manna, that each day it would appear and they could only collect what was good for that day. It would go bad otherwise, so that man would be perpetually dependent upon the Father. And we also must realize that today, the need of daily calling upon him for our provisions for that day. The fifth request is to forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. You know, this is a strange request because it actually lays much of the burden on our own actions toward others. Father, you need only forgive me as much as I am willing to forgive others of their wrongs. It's a great reminder of how our hearts should be, just as God forgives us. And then the sixth request is, lead us not into temptation. And James reminds us, by the way, that God cannot be blamed for tempting man. But here we beg him that he would not allow us to be drawn and sucked into those tempting situations, just as Peter was whenever he gathered with that crowd and ended up denying Jesus 3 times. Lord, keep us from that. And the seventh request, deliver us from the evil one. Since we know that God is all powerful, he has power over Satan and can actually draw us back from his clutches and his evil devices. This prayer may not need to be recited somewhat superstitiously, but its 7 requests need to be made known daily. If we want God to take first place with reverence and holiness, if we want his will to be done in our lives, if we want to make sure that our daily provisions are taken care of, our protections are being heard and answered, then we must pray this 7-fold prayer that Jesus has modeled for his followers.